Everyone's watching silver hit new records and celebrating gains they'll never actually keep. Right now, January 28th, 2025, silver is trading near all-time highs, and investors feel wealthy. But here's what the institutional players already know. The confiscation has already begun. At $200 silver, the wealth transfer mechanism activates automatically without a single agent. Most won't realize they've been robbed until the money's already gone from their accounts. Welcome to The Boring Currency, where I break down what really moves markets behind the scenes. Before we go further, I need you to do something important for this community we're building. If you've been following silver for years, drop a comment below with your position and thesis. Tell me what you think happens next at these price levels, and I'll respond to every comment. Unlike Wall Street analysts, I actually care what real investors think about these markets. All right, let's get into this because the clock is ticking and the window's closing fast. Silver just crossed levels most analysts said were impossible only 6 months ago in 2024. The mainstream narrative is simple: industrial demand, supply deficits, and safe haven buying. All true, but all surface level, missing the actual mechanism that's about to destroy wealth. Most investors are preparing for the wrong threat entirely, and it's going to cost them. They read history books about 1933, study Executive Order 6102, imagine federal agents knocking. They're building elaborate storage solutions, buying allocated vaults, and feeling completely protected. But the real confiscation won't announce itself with executive orders or men in uniforms at doors. It won't require physical seizure because modern theft has evolved past the need for any force. The tools are already in place, legal frameworks written, and trigger points already established. All that's missing is the crisis that activates them, and $200 silver is exactly that crisis. Let's establish something clearly from the start, so there's absolutely no confusion moving forward. Yes, governments have confiscated precious metals before, and yes, it could happen again technically. In 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, requiring citizens to sell their gold. The price was fixed at $20.67 per ounce, and most Americans complied voluntarily without resistance. Not because they wanted to, but because penalties were severe: $10,000 fines and 10 years in prison. But here's what most people completely misunderstand about that specific historical moment in America. The confiscation wasn't about greed or control. It was about systemic necessity for the system. America operated on a gold standard back then, and every dollar needed gold physically backing it. The government couldn't expand money supply without collecting more physical gold from citizens first. It was a structural requirement of the monetary system itself, not a power grab by politicians. Today, something fundamental has changed that most investors haven't fully processed in their analysis. Gold and silver no longer function as everyday money in any major economy anywhere in the world. In 1933, people carried gold coins in their pockets and used them for daily transactions everywhere. Gold was money, money was gold, and the two were completely inseparable in practice back then. Now, nobody walks around with gold or silver conducting any commerce in physical metals at all. Our entire system runs on fiat currency, paper and digital, completely divorced from any metal backing. Gold sits in central bank vaults and investor safes as purely a store of value now. Silver has become primarily an industrial metal embedded in phones, solar panels, and electronics worldwide. The traditional monetary function is gone, and this changes everything about actual confiscation risk today. Because if precious metals aren't functioning as money anymore, why would any government even bother? The answer is simple and obvious. They wouldn't bother with physical confiscation at all anymore. But this is exactly where most analysts stop thinking and make their single most critical mistake. They conclude no gold standard equals no confiscation risk whatsoever, nothing to worry about here. And that conclusion is dangerously, catastrophically wrong for one simple reason they completely miss. While physical confiscation has become irrelevant, functional confiscation has become easier than ever before. The government doesn't need to knock on doors or require physical surrender of metals anymore. They have far more elegant tools now that transfer wealth without ever touching a single coin. Tools that operate automatically, quietly, systematically, and most investors won't see them coming at all. When silver reaches $200, the IRS doesn't need new laws because the trap was set decades ago. Right now, as you're watching this, precious metals are classified as collectibles by the tax code. Not investments, not currencies, not strategic assets, but collectibles like baseball cards or vintage wine. This single classification subjects all your gains to a 28% capital gains tax rate automatically. That's nearly double the long-term rate for stocks, and most silver investors have no idea this exists. But that 28% is just the foundation, the starting point before the real confiscation mechanism activates. Let me show you exactly how this works because the details matter more than most people realize. Imagine you bought silver at $25 per ounce 3 years ago when everyone said it was dead money. Now it's trading at $200. You're sitting on an 8x return, feeling like a genius for holding through. You decide to sell, lock in profits, finally take that vacation you've been postponing for years. But here's what actually happens when you execute that trade and the government gets involved immediately. First, the dealer files Form 8300 because your transaction exceeds $10,000, triggering automatic reporting. Your name, address, social security number, transaction details, all sent directly to the IRS within days. Then capital gains tax hits, 28% on collectibles, so $49 per ounce goes straight to the Treasury. Your $200 silver is now worth $151 after federal tax, before state tax, before any other considerations. But wait, because in high-tax states like California or New York, add another 10-13% state tax. Now you're looking at keeping maybe $140 per ounce from your $200 sale if you're lucky with timing. That's a 30% reduction in your nominal gains before we even discuss what inflation did to purchasing power. And this is the baseline scenario, the friendly version, before emergency measures get introduced at all. Now let's talk about what happens when silver doesn't just hit $200 but keeps climbing higher. At $250, at $300, when gains become too large for the government to ignore during economic crisis. History gives us a perfect blueprint, and it's not from precious metals, it's from the oil industry. In 1980, the United States government passed the crude oil windfall profit tax during the energy crisis. It levied up to 70% on domestic oil profits because the government decided those gains were excessive. The reasoning was simple and politically bulletproof. Companies profiting while citizens suffer is unfair. The public supported it, the media amplified it, the legislation passed quickly with minimal opposition. Now apply that exact same logic to precious metals when silver hits $200 or $300 per ounce. Early investors sitting on 10x, 15x, maybe 20x gains, while inflation destroys middle-class purchasing power. The political optics write themselves without any effort. Windfall profits during national economic emergency. Excessive speculation while working families can barely afford groceries and rent keeps climbing monthly. Fair contribution to national recovery, shared sacrifice, everyone must do their part for America. The justification is already written, focus grouped, and ready to deploy the moment crisis becomes visible. And when that legislation appears, it won't start at 70% because that would trigger immediate resistance. It will start at 35%, presented as temporary emergency measure, just until the crisis stabilizes somewhat. Then 45% after 6 months when the crisis doesn't stabilize, but actually gets worse than expected. Then 60% when public pressure demands the wealthy contribute more to recovery efforts nationwide. Each step politically defensible, each increase economically devastating, each move completely legal and constitutional. The metals never leave your safe, but 60% of your wealth disappears into the Treasury permanently. You keep the physical silver, but the government takes the purchasing power you thought you protected. This is functional confiscation, and it's far more effective than sending agents to knock on doors. But here's where it gets even more sophisticated than most investors can possibly imagine right now. The government doesn't even need to pass new taxation if they simply adjust existing regulatory frameworks. Remember that $10,000 reporting threshold on Form 8300 that triggers automatic dealer reporting to IRS? That number was set in 1984, over 40 years ago, and hasn't been adjusted for inflation once. In 1984, $10,000 had the purchasing power of roughly $30,000 in today's inflated currency. But the threshold stayed frozen at $10,000, which means the net gets tighter automatically every single year. At $25 silver, you could buy 400 ounces before triggering reporting, giving you some transactional privacy. At $200 silver, you can only buy 50 ounces before your entire transaction gets reported to federal authorities. The reporting expands automatically without new legislation, without congressional votes, without any public debate. And here's what most people completely miss about this reporting expansion and its actual purpose. The government isn't just collecting tax data, they're building a comprehensive database of who holds what. Every transaction, every dealer, every purchase pattern, every sale, all cataloged, analyzed, and stored permanently. When the time comes to implement wealth transfer mechanisms, they already know exactly who to target. No need to guess who holds metals, no need to search, no need to investigate anything at all. The infrastructure for systematic confiscation is already built and operating at full capacity right now. Here's the masterpiece that makes taxation look like child's play compared to its actual impact. Inflation is the ultimate confiscation tool because it requires zero legislation, zero enforcement, zero political risk. It happens automatically, constantly, relentlessly, and most investors never realize they're being systematically robbed. Let me show you the math that will fundamentally change how you think about $200 silver forever. Right now, official CPI inflation sits around 3 and 4%, but anyone buying groceries knows that's complete fiction. Real inflation, the kind you feel at the gas pump and grocery store, runs closer to 8 to 12% annually. But let's be conservative and use the official numbers, because even those destroy the silver gains narrative. Imagine silver climbs from $25 to $200 over the next 3 years, an 8x return that looks incredible. During those same 3 years, cumulative inflation at just 4% annually reduces purchasing power by 12%. So your $200 silver in 2028 dollars is really worth about 176 in today's actual purchasing power. Still a great return, but we're not done yet because taxation hasn't taken its cut from you. Subtract 28% capital gains tax on collectibles, now you're at $127 in real purchasing power terms. Add state taxes in high-tax states, and you're looking at maybe $115 per ounce in real wealth. You started at $25, ended at $115 in real terms. That's a 4.6x return, not 8x like you thought. Still good, but nowhere near the nominal number everyone celebrates when they see $200 silver headlines. Now let's run the nightmare scenario that's actually far more likely than the conservative projection above. Silver hits $200, but it takes 5 years instead of 3 because manipulation and delays persist. During those 5 years, real inflation runs at 10% annually as the monetary system deteriorates further. Cumulative purchasing power loss over 5 years at 10% annual inflation equals nearly 41% destruction. Your $200 silver is now worth $118 in real purchasing power before any taxation gets involved. Apply the 28% capital gains tax. You're down to $85 in real terms after the government takes its share. You bought at $25 and sold at $200 nominal, but only gained $60 in real purchasing power over 5 years. That's a 2.4x real return. And if inflation was understated, you might barely break even in real terms. This is the invisible confiscation that operates while everyone watches the nominal price and celebrates gains. The government doesn't take your silver, they simply destroy the measuring stick you're using to calculate wealth. And here's the part that makes this truly diabolical compared to any historical confiscation method ever. Inflation transfers wealth from savers and holders to debtors and spenders automatically without any legislation. From those who accumulated assets to those who accumulated debt, and who's the biggest debtor in human history? The United States government with $35 trillion in acknowledged debt and over $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities. Every percentage point of inflation reduces the real value of that debt burden without paying a single dollar. It's systematic debt cancellation paid for by every person holding currency or currency-denominated assets anywhere, including precious metals investors who think they're protected because they're holding physical silver in vaults. They're not protected from inflation. They're just losing wealth slower than people holding cash in banks. But slower loss is still loss, and at certain inflation rates, even silver barely keeps pace with destruction. Now here's where this gets even more sophisticated than most analysts understand about government strategy today. The Federal Reserve and Treasury don't even need to publicly acknowledge high inflation for it to work. They can manipulate CPI calculations, adjust weighting methodologies, exclude inconvenient categories from official numbers. Housing costs too high? Change the measurement from prices to owner's equivalent rent calculations instead. Food prices soaring? Adjust the basket, substitute cheaper items, apply hedonic adjustments to the data. The official number says 3%, while your actual costs increase 10%, but policy gets made on official numbers. Social Security adjustments based on official CPI. Wage negotiations reference official data. Everything ties to manipulated statistics. So even as real inflation destroys purchasing power, the official narrative maintains the illusion of stability. And silver investors celebrating $200 prices don't realize they're measuring success with a manipulated, shrinking ruler. Compare this three-part system to the 1933 physical confiscation that everyone still fears and studies obsessively. Physical confiscation required enforcement, compliance, political will, public acceptance, legal justification, and physical logistics. It was expensive, visible, politically risky, and required active participation from millions of citizens nationwide. But regulatory capture through reporting requirements operates automatically without any public awareness or debate. Windfall taxation gets justified through political optics during crisis and passes with strong public support. Inflation happens through monetary policy without legislation, without votes, without any accountability to the population. These three mechanisms are already operational right now, already transferring wealth, already working exactly as designed. And at $200 silver, they don't get created or implemented. They simply shift into maximum overdrive mode. Because that price level represents something far more dangerous than just a number on a trading screen. It represents a crisis of confidence in the entire fiat monetary system that governments cannot allow to spread. $200 silver announces to the world that professional money, institutional capital, and sovereign wealth has lost faith. It declares that the largest, most sophisticated players in global finance are running for the exits now. And when elephants stampede and panic, everyone notices, and the contagion spreads faster than any policy response. So the question isn't whether intervention comes at those price levels, the question is what form it takes exactly. And we've just outlined the three mechanisms already built, legally established, and waiting for activation. No new laws needed, no dramatic announcements required, no political battles to fight or win first. Just automatic, systematic, and visible wealth transfer from metals holders to the government and connected insiders. The confiscation is already happening right now. It just accelerates dramatically when silver crosses critical thresholds. Most investors won't see it until their purchasing power has already been destroyed beyond any hope of recovery. So, what does an intelligent investor actually do with this information right now in January 2025? Because understanding the threat is completely worthless if it doesn't change your behavior and positioning. Most investors make one of two catastrophic mistakes when confronted with systemic risk like this. They either panic and liquidate everything immediately, or they freeze completely and do absolutely nothing. Both responses are wrong, and both will cost you significant wealth over the next few years. The sophisticated approach is neither fear nor denial. It's calibrated positioning based on probability assessment. Physical confiscation of metals from private citizens. Extremely low probability, maybe 5% over the next decade. But windfall taxation on precious metals gains. High probability, around 70% likelihood once prices reach extremes. Regulatory capture and automatic reporting expansion. Near certainty, approximately 95% probability within 5 years. Inflation-based wealth erosion destroying purchasing power. Absolute certainty, 100% probability, already fully operational. With those probabilities established, the strategic calculus for positioning becomes much clearer and actionable. Holding precious metals still makes sense, but not as a singular strategy or buy and hold forever approach. The environment isn't static, it's dynamically hostile, and adaptability matters more than conviction now. History suggests governments prefer incremental control over dramatic, visible seizure attempts every single time. The windfall tax doesn't appear overnight at 70%. It starts at maybe 20% as temporary emergency measure, then extends to 30% due to ongoing crisis, then 50% as fair share contribution to recovery. The smart money doesn't wait around for the 70% rate. It recognizes the pattern and moves at 20%. For the business owner or serious operator, metals serve a specific function in overall portfolio architecture. They're not the foundation of wealth, they're insurance against currency collapse and monetary system breakdown. At $25 silver and current price levels, insurance is reasonably priced and terms are favorable still. At $200 silver with extreme valuations, insurance becomes expensive, and the insurer looks for cancellation clauses. Primary wealth should reside in productive assets that generate actual cash flow and solve real problems. Businesses, real estate, intellectual property, things that create value and produce consistent income streams. Precious metals are the backup system, not the primary engine driving your wealth creation forward. The final strategic imperative is simple. Stop preparing for 1933 because that playbook is obsolete now. Start preparing for what's actually coming. Systematic wealth transfer through boring, invisible legal mechanisms. The regulatory fine print, the tax code adjustments, the inflation policy, these are modern confiscation tools. And they're already at work today, already transferring wealth, already operating at full capacity worldwide. At $200 silver, they don't get created or implemented, they simply accelerate to maximum velocity. The threat isn't behind us in history books, it's directly ahead, built into the system, waiting. So position accordingly, monitor actively, adapt continuously, because the rules are changing whether you're ready or not.